Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this horror movie review as part of my 31 Horror Movies in May series. So today we're going to take a look at a movie that I have not watched before, first time watch for me. It's a pretty well-known movie, especially in the last 15 years, and that is The Collector from 2009. And I know there's a sequel to this, which I also own. Hoping to include that review in my October series like this, the 31 horror movies in October Halloween series. But today we're going to take a look at The Collector, the original from 2009. So let's just go ahead and get into it, starting with the setup, the premise, and the cast, and then I'll get into my thoughts and review, which will once again be spoiler free. So, The Collector is a 2009 American horror film written by Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan and directed by Marcus Dunstan. The film follows a man who, in order to pay a debt, decides to rob a house, only to find out somebody with far more sinister intentions has already broken in. So it opens with married couple Larry and Gina Wharton return home to find that the power is out. They discover a large trunk upstairs and are horrified by its contents. They are then attacked by an unseen assailant. Former convict Arkin O'Brien works as a handyman for the Chase family. He is generally well liked by the Chases, especially the young daughter Hannah. After work, Arkin meets his wife, whose debt to several loan sharks is due at midnight. To protect her and their daughter, Arkin plans to steal a valuable ruby from the Chase home. As Arkin attempts to crack the safe, a masked figure locks the door. Michael, the father, appears with several injuries. Mistaking Arkin for the perpetrator, he grabs a golf club. Michael's action triggers a trap that incapacitates him, and the masked man drags Michael into the basement. Arkin attempts to call 911, but the phone is rigged with a spike that punctures his ear. The windows have been boarded up and lined with razors, making escape impossible. So yeah, that's the gist, the setup, and the premise of this movie, the beginning of it. Cast wise, we have Josh Stewart as Arkin O'Brien, Michael Riley Burke as Michael Chase, Andrea Roth as Victoria Chase, Juan Fernandez as the Collector, and Carly Scott Collins as Hannah Chase. So yeah, this movie is interesting because it's kind of the Saw meets Home Invasion. I think it's a good way to sum this up. Combining a couple of subgenres there. The I don't like the term torture porn, but kind of the Saw sort of whatever you consider Saw to be as a subgenre of horror. Saw meets The Strangers, basically. Home Invasion versus or meets Saw. That's kind of how I see this movie. But I will say that it's not just a standard torture porn. It's not just there to show you how much torture they can do to a human being. There actually is a pretty compelling story and a compelling character involved in this movie. So let's just go ahead and get into it with my starting with my pros and my review. So the character arc that we get with our main character, Arkin, you don't often see that in these types of movies. It's interesting because he's not really, they do a good job of setting up his character as being, he does bad things for good reasons, basically. So he's not really a good guy. He's more of a good guy than a bad guy, but a good guy that does bad things, but with good intentions, if that makes sense. A very sort of gray character. In terms of good versus evil or good versus bad. He's kind of in the gray area there. But he's got a really good arc in this movie because he becomes our protagonist in this movie, even though his intentions, we understand what his intentions are and why he has them. But then quickly as the movie unfolds, he becomes sort of the good guy, the hero, if you will, trying to save as many people as he can in this movie. And it really comes full circle by the end, and it's really effective. I think it's really an added layer that this movie has. So that's definitely a pro that I have. Jumping on that point, it has a good setup to the start of the movie, understanding, as I said, why the character's doing what he's doing and why and how he ends up in this situation. A lot of times in horror movies, people just make bad decisions to end up in bad situations, but we actually understand why he's there, even though it's not the most honest or moral reasons. He does have his reasons. You know, he's trying to protect his wife and his daughter, and with some debt that's due to loan sharks by midnight on this day, and having worked at this house before, he knows that they have some valuables that he can use. So it's a movie just has a good setup to it, and it's an important setup is for us as an audience to sort of set up this character as well as the movie. It makes sense, and it's not just a cheap or lazy reason that he's there. Then you got to talk about the collector himself here, who I think is a great villain, one of the great modern villains in horror movies here. Starting with his look, with this mask here, which isn't anything overly fancy or overly, overly um, complicated or anything, but it's got a really effective and scary look to it. He also has black gloves and a black suit. Just the way his eyes look, that you can see his eyes through the mask when the light bounces off of it or hits it in a certain way. Very creepy, very scary. And then on top of that, you add to the fact that he's also about as demented and brutal as a killer, or a villain could be in a movie. From the traps that he sets to the torture he inflicts on different family members to creepily watching and waiting different family members doing different things. Very scary and intimidating villain here in the collector. So yeah, like I said, I'd never seen this movie before, but he instantly just jumped off the screen as this guy doesn't mess around, basically. So, very effective. The traps that are set in the house are really creative, and it kind of sets up a game of Mousetrap. That's kind of what I thought of watching this movie. It kind of reminds me of that board game Mousetrap, if you played that when you were a kid, just in terms of with the wires and everything. When somebody picks up an object that's attached to a wire or a trap or something, and it kind of sets things in motion. Um, yeah, it really makes for an effective and scary watch. This movie definitely has a lot of blood and gore in it, and torture. So, for those of you that really enjoy that sort of subgenre, or just like a really gory movie, this is definitely going to be for you. You're definitely going to enjoy it. I'm not as much of like a gore hound or a torture porn. It's not my favorite subgenre, but when it's presented in a way that has a lot more layers to the movie than just kind of like that was kind of becomes a problem with Saw as the movies go on. They just throw these people in a room and let's see how much blood and gore we can have these traps pull out of them here. And I know the first one's not like that, but anyway, getting back to this movie has a really good, compelling story to go with it. And yeah, there's torture and there's gore and there's blood in it for sure as part of the story, and it's very, very realistic as well. Really grounded movie. Where was I going with this? Oh, but just in terms of the gore, it's definitely going to be for those people that like gorier horror movies or gorier movies in general. But it's the type of gore that's more disturbing gore than it is over the top fun gore, which I actually kind of prefer because I know it's not as real or grounded in reality. This is more the gore that you could actually see happening, like on a home video or something, which is terrifying and disturbing. But that was the point of it in this movie. It makes you wince and it scares you. Carnage candy galore. That's the best way to sum it up. But this movie, as I said, does have a story to tell. It isn't just there to gross you out. It does have those themes of like classic battle themes of good versus evil and morality tale, if you will, cat and mouse game going on. Who's going to come out on top? It's a very engaging film in that regard. And I also have to mention that I really love the atmosphere in this movie, from the weather taking place outside to just the eerie tone in the house, and as the how things are being shown, and like overhead shots of seeing one and on one side of the door and another on the other side of the door. I really love the atmosphere as well as the suspense and tension that's built up in certain scenes throughout this movie. Very creepy and effective. And then my final pro for this movie is the music cues and the score to the movie. I thought it was very creepy and very effective. I really enjoyed it, especially as in certain scenes and certain moments of this movie. And of course, you got to talk a little bit about the ending as well, which you think it's going to be kind of and some of it's probably there for sequel ability, but you kind of think it's a happy ending, so to speak. The girl, this guy gets the girl out, and he's being hauled to the hospital, and then shit hits the fan basically, and it definitely ends with a sequel in mind. But it's a very it's a very effective and dark ending to the movie. So yeah, those are all my pros. There's a lot of them. It's a really well done, well crafted movie. Even though I might not necessarily enjoy all the torture and the bloody content in it, I enjoy the story enough as well as recognizing that it's from a technical standpoint, it's a pretty well done, well made movie with an original idea as well. So there are a couple cons that I have with the movie. The biggest one being just in terms of plausibility, especially as it relates to the traps. You know, there's about 4 hours between when our main character Arkin leaves and then comes back to do this robbery, and how the collector is able to get in there and set up all these traps within 4 hours by himself, because they're pretty elaborate traps, not just in the windows but in all the rooms, and to hook up all these wires. I that definitely strains credulity a little bit there. Especially when you have a movie that's really grounded in reality. When you take it at face value, some of those things kind of would remind you of a Friday the 13th movie where you just forget about the logic, just go with it. But that's hard to do because, like I said, this movie's so grounded in reality. But so yeah, there's some timeline implausibilities there, how quickly the traps are set in the different rooms, and also how over the top some of the traps are. It seems like it would take you at least a weekend to set some of those things up. So there's definitely some logic gaps there. And again, they're only logic gaps that stand out because of the fact that this movie was made to be grounded in reality and not sort of an over the top horror movie like you might see from the 80s. And then the other thing is the way that this movie is shot with this sort of grainy, lower quality images and shooting to the movie. It ends up aging the movie a lot more than it needed to be, especially as time goes on and technology advances. The movie is going to end up looking worse and worse as time goes on because of the low quality way that they shot it. Certain scenes, especially, can be distracting with it, especially as there's less darkness and scenes that are more lit with like a color palette of oranges and stuff. That's really where it stands out, where it's really not going to age that well. But that's pretty much all I have for cons. You really can't rip this movie enough. Again, it's not one that I'll necessarily reach for a lot, but because I'm just not a big fan of people being tortured and all that kind of stuff, it's just not my go-to subgenre of horror. But that being said, I can watch it because there is a really compelling story, a really compelling main character, protagonist, as well as a very interesting villain, very scary and depraved as well. Just all those different elements kind of at least balance out the torture and the gore there for me. So I'm going to give this movie an 8.5 out of 10 for what it is. It's pretty outstanding, especially the unique concept of combining a couple different subgenres there, and I think it works really well from beginning to end, with the setup all the way to the shocking ending. So 8.5 out of 10 for The Collector from 2009. Go ahead and comment down below, guys, if you've seen The Collector, what you think of it. Do you like it? Do not like it? Why not? Please like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos on this series. And please be sure to hit the subscribe button on my channel down below so you don't miss any of my great horror content I have coming up over the rest of this year and beyond even. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day. Stay scared. Bye.